Hey, Paul, I've got a great idea for this week's episode.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Conspiracy theories.
Didn't we already record one on conspiracy theories?
No, don't think so. No.
I remember we went to record one on that and then I don't remember anything after that.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Three Views On podcast. Again, talking to you about conspiracy theories. Fellas, you know what? I feel like I had a dream once that we recorded an episode about this.
I thought you were about to start off with a Martin Luther King reference. But yes, no, I think we have. I think our podcast feed confirms the fact that we've trodden this ground before, Simon.
Are you sure? You'll have to check the website.
Yeah.
It's
I've
definitely looked through, and I'm pretty sure it goes, I can't remember the exact episode, but it's like one's missing.
I went to click on the episode and I just got this picture of George Bush. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, who knows?
Anyway, the reason we're revisiting this topic is because met a new guy at work, and he was just started telling me about conspiracy theories. I don't know how we got onto this. Oh no, we were talking about the podcast.
Yeah,
he's a big podcast listener.
Oh, I see.
And we were talking about my podcast. He'd seen it on Facebook. Just asked me some random, technical questions. Mm-hmm. And then he was telling me about the sort of podcast he listens to, and I took a couple steps back. No, we had some very interesting conversations about conspiracy theories, and look, he offered to be a guest, and I was like, that sounds good.
Wow.
Sounds very good. Someone who actually knows some stuff, because last episode we talked about conspiracy theories. We said some pretty random things. However, I did hear from Sean that Paul was actually throwing out some accurate names of conspiracy theorist proponents.
Oh, yeah.
And things like that. And things that I didn't even know. Like, I remember most things that are in most episodes because I edit them and whatnot. But there was this bit that Sean picked up that I didn't even remember, which is pretty rare for me. But it was about a name of some guy. Anyway, Sean will tell us about that.
I feel that there could be a conspiracy going on. Because, Simon remembers most episodes, but I feel like as soon as I finish recording an episode, the whole thing is erased from my mind. Are you in the same boat, Paul?
Absolutely. I'm captaining that ship, Michael. Normally my memory's pretty good, but I selectively delete whatever we discussed on the podcast. So let's get into this bad boy. Simon, why don't you introduce us to your friend?
Alrighty. Are you there, Sean?
I am. Hello, guys. Thanks for having me along.
Our pleasure, man. Our pleasure. I can't wait to hear what you've got to say.
Tell us a bit about yourself, Sean. How'd you end up in Hobart?
How'd I end up in Hobart? It was a lifestyle change. My wife and I had, I should be careful about how much information I give because you never know who's going to listen to your podcast. Take your information, really, don't you?
True to form.
Let's just say I had yet another midlife crisis. I think it's probably number 4 or 5 now, and it was time to move along. So my family and I moved from sunny Queensland to occasionally sunny Hobart.
Very good.
And have never looked back.
Okay.
Very good. Well, that's exciting. And somewhere along the line, Sean, you developed a keen interest in alternative explanations, maybe ideas that we are not fed by the mass media or other sources, but alternative truths. Yeah,
well, look, I've always had an interest in conspiracy theories. I'm sure you guys weren't even around in the time, but in the early 80s and 90s, it was all about the moon landing and the JFK assassination, and then it got into alien abductions and all these other sorts of things. And a lot of it at the time wasn't necessarily credible, but it was a good read. It was good to understand. And let me start off by saying, or I don't know if we have to save this till your opinions at the end, I don't necessarily believe in these, but I enjoy the journey. I enjoy the propaganda that comes into it. I enjoy the way that people love to present their opinions and their absolute beliefs in these mad theories. Some of them are just completely out there. But when you get into them enough, you can actually start to understand why they believe them so wholeheartedly, because their argument is so compelling, and the effort that they put into it. But with any propaganda, it's presenting an argument. It's not necessarily the lies. It's presenting an argument to strengthen your truth. And so that's where I sort of got into it from there.
Very, very good. Now I'm excited. And before we do kick off into the episode proper and hear some of Sean's great theories, it's important that we do give a disclaimer.
Can we say they're not? Can we just sort of say they're not actually my theories?
Okay, sure. No, that makes a lot of sense, and it's probably a worthwhile distinction. Before we hear about some of these theories which are existing in this ether of conspiracies, Michael, Simon and I and Sean will all probably say things during this episode which we aren't necessarily propagating as our own personal beliefs. I'm not a huge fan of disclaimers, but I thought I'd get that out of the way.
Very cool.
Yeah, so we like to toss ideas around, and Sean sounds like the same sort of character. Toss ideas around, chuck everything up in the air, see what sticks, and we'll and as Sean said, it's the journey that is so fun.
It's true. Now, Sean, before we started this episode, we had a quick chance to kind of highlight some, in my opinion, crazy conspiracy theories with some fantastic stories. But I want to know, what is the most out there, most ridiculous conspiracy theory you've heard of yet?
Well, putting aside all the alien abductions and those sorts of things, because I just, I can't, the science behind it just doesn't back that up for me. But there are people out there who do believe it. And let me also go on to the disclaimer and say any of this stuff you can actually find on YouTube or websites or anything like that. I don't have any secret sources, and I most certainly don't go looking for things, because you never know. You don't want the men in black to be knocking at your door.
For sure. Definitely true.
Yeah.
But perhaps the most out there one, I think, sort of goes hand in hand with the hollow earth theory, with the lizard people. And I think you mentioned in your last podcast about David Icke. And David Icke is the proponent, probably the biggest proponent of the lizard people. He's an English gentleman who was a very promising footballer, soccer player, for those who want to know, but got arthritis at a young age. So then went into sports broadcasting, was very popular. Then turned up on Wogan, which is like one of those late night Jimmy Fallon type shows in the late 90s, and suddenly came out with this thing that he was the godson, and that there were lizard people controlling the earth. The lizard people have gone from anywhere from being the English royal family, he sees as the main proponents, and I think every US president since JFK or somewhere along there has been a lizard person, put in by, for want of a better term, the Illuminati, who all live live in the hollow earth. So they live in subterranean places where you can only access it at certain points. Well, one of which being the Denver International Airport. If you ever want to look up, if you ever want a good read to bury yourself in, the Denver International Airport is one of the big conspiracy theories. It's the biggest airport in the world for the 7th busiest airport in the US. And it's this massive space that's been dug out, and there's all this strange iconography and all these images and things in there, which we could talk about for a long time. The other entry point to the base is in Antarctica, which is where Hitler and the Nazis retreated to after the Second World War. So Hitler, faking his own death, retreated to there, and they're since regathering their strengths to be able to come out and make another go at it. So
I suppose here's the golden question then.
Ones.
Is Hitler a lizard person?
Is Hitler what? I don't know that it ever comes to that, but he seems
to be in league with them.
There is actual evidence to suggest that Hitler and the Nazis were very much into occultism and travelled the world before the Second World War started. And one of the conspiracy theories is that the Second World War was actually started not for global domination as such, but to be able to gather these, it was for global domination, I guess, but to gather these artifacts like the Spear of Destiny, which was the spear that pierced Christ's side, and anyone who held the Spear of Destiny would control the earth, but as soon as you lost the spear, you would die. And so there's all these sorts of things, the Ark of the Covenant and those sorts of things as well. I don't know if Hitler himself was a lizard person, but they sort of all sort of run into each other, and that's where you start to go a bit cross-eyed and steam comes out your ears, and you have to stop listening, otherwise you start seeing people destroying you and all these other mad things. So
That's exactly right. And so let's go now from the ridiculous or the crazy. I mean, the question was what's the craziest theory? But Sean, obviously not all conspiracy theories are crazy. In fact, there are some that many people deem to in fact be quite credible. I know you can't pick one, probably that's always a tough question. But
yeah.
is there a theory that you hold to that you think is actually quite a credible explanation of the facts?
Well, probably all the ones at the moment that are probably in the contemporary issues that we see sadly not far too often, but not every day, are the false flag events. Now, if you ever want to listen to somebody that's right up on these, there's an American journalist by the name of Alex Jones, and he runs Infowars.com and has run these for quite some time. He gets a little bit shouty and a little bit over the top American, but he's probably the main man in conspiracy theories at the moment. And these false flag events and false flag event comes back from the time when the pirates in the Caribbean used to fly the flag of a nation to be able to get into the port or to get close to the ship, and then so they would fly under the false flag, and then when they attacked, they'd raise the Jolly Roger or whichever flag it was that they were flying under at the time. So these false flag events basically the use of propaganda or using an event to maintain a political agenda or to create a war. And one of probably the most prominent one of modern times is the 9/11 bombings, which many people say was a government attack, that the 4 planes were actually only the 2 that we saw, that the Pentagon was actually hit by American missiles fired from black helicopters. And the other one was just a hole in the ground that got dug. The planes that flew into the towers were just drones that were being flown, because they certainly look like they're more grey than silver. And some of this stuff is very compelling. It's very believable, but yet again, the propaganda that is used behind it does support it. And I would suggest, if you want to look at any of this, there's a film on YouTube that gets updated every 6 to 12 months or so. It's called Loose Change. And there's another one called In Plain Sight, which is plain as in aeroplane, rather than plain as in PLAI.
Yes. Yeah.
And yet again, these conspiracy theories are easily resourced, and they're well accessible on places like YouTube. My trouble with that is I find it hard to believe that a government would sacrifice 3,000 of its own people just to a certain end.
Yeah, but the lizard people aren't human.
Yeah.
Well,
there's the trick.
Well, this
There
is
is
something,
that.
I mean, I've done, as you might know, Sean, I've done a little bit of looking into this and quite some time ago, but I hear, from what I understand, that there was next to no aeronautical debris at the Pentagon itself. So there's essentially no plane. They went looking for the plane there, and there was no plane.
Well, the other argument is there's no plane. There's no evidence of a plane at the Pentagon. You'd have to think we've got 2 images that we get from basically boom gate cameras, which show before and after. You see an explosion. The story goes that soon afterwards, because there's a lot of businesses around, and let's face it, it's the Pentagon. They'd have film everywhere, of everything going, that nothing's. And so it's the lack of evidence that compels these conspiracy theorists. Yet again, I can see the possibility. I just find it hard to believe that you would do this to your own people just to want to go to war, to drive the war machine.
Yeah, wow. It seems like people would spend a lot of time building these arguments. And the question is that I have, what do you reckon is in it for them? Do you reckon there's much money in driving the conspiracy theory bandwagon? Or is it just the passion?
I think it's a lot of people like to search for the truth. We live in an age where we know that the media only ever send us one side of any story. You can see that from the way things go, depending on who owns the news site. So the media is not necessarily believable, but it seems to be a tool of that. What's in it for people? Some people just hate the government. Some people need to have these conspiracy theories. I'm not really sure why people do it. There are certainly some underhanded things. I mean, you can look at you can look at all the government programs, and the fact that the majority of these conspiracy theories come out of America, which is relatively affluent society, with a huge population, the third biggest population of 360 million people. So there's a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands. I don't really know. I guess I've never really thought of it in that regard. I mean, you can waste your time on it all the time if you really want to research this, but there's conferences for it, there's discussion boards, chat rooms, all these other sorts of things that you can get onto. And it's like any sort of thing, you can become obsessed with it very quickly.
Yeah, you were saying that guy who went off the deep end with the lizard people, he's written a lot of books, hasn't he?
Yeah, David Icke apparently has written, I think it's something like 20-odd books that are all international bestsellers.
So there's the money.
He has had, and let's not forget, he was very successful to begin with. He was a very successful sports broadcaster who seemed to push it all away simply for his belief in this sort of thing. But he also gives seminars that go for apparently 12 and 14 hours. And he packs arenas. And yeah, there's all these mad things. So these people are very well supported. Very well supported.
There seems to be, from what I can tell, this meta propaganda above them all, which is the intentional deriding of anyone who believes a quote-unquote conspiracy theory. You understand? So, like, I think that in itself is very powerful propaganda out there. So if you even cast any questions into 9/11 or other government activity, people can actually label you with this big fat sticker as a conspiracy theorist, and then all of a sudden your opinion is no longer of any account. Have you experienced some of that, Sean?
Not up until now. I'm not sure where this is going. Like I say, I like the discussion. I like the use of the propaganda. I like the historical events behind it, and I like the alternate theories. There's one of the podcasts, perhaps the main podcast I listen to, is by a couple of Irish guys called Those Conspiracy Guys. And they always say, question your sources. So you've got to go in and question where these people are getting their attention from, where they're getting their information from. And so, no, I haven't. But by the same token, Simon, I guess you'll remember that it was only incidental that I happened to mention it, and I started off pretty slowly. And if people's eyes start to glaze over or they get a bit squinty at you, you sort of stop. Yeah. And yet again, I believe in the possibility of some of these things, but I don't know. I think people have got a lot of time on their hands, and I don't think I really have the time to look into whether Elvis and Michael Jackson are living together in Tupac's mansion somewhere. I enjoy the conversation because it's not the run of the mill sort of thing. So I would just always say question your sources on these sorts of things, because there is a lot of stuff out there. And if the government really wanted to cover it up, why is it so freely available on YouTube?
You're not wrong.
Now, Sean, the other day at work, you were telling me that you had to take a break from conspiracy theories for a while. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been listening to an episode on MK Ultra, and MK Ultra, just as a bit of background, is actually the US government has admitted to the MK Ultra program that ran from 1953 to 1973, and it was basically using, you probably heard they used test subjects using LSD and using mind control and brainwashing and those sorts of things. And so I've been listening to this, and then MK Ultra, particularly with Those Conspiracy Guys podcasts, they tend to link it into a lot of things. So a lot of people who were known to be assassins that yet again had amazing hit rates with these shots that they produced. The mind control, and then people following them, and then they had people and they did things that they didn't know. So I was listening to a conspiracy theory, and Hobart's not a great big place. There's cabs around, so I was driving along, and one of the benefits of working in the city is there's no parking, so you drive around looking for things. And I looked into my rearview mirror, and there's this red cab behind me, so I pulled over and let him past, and then I found a park and was walking along. I saw this same red cab again. I thought, it's a bit odd that I'd noticed a red cab. Why a red cab? And so then I'm walking down to work and I saw it again. So, 3 times in 10 minutes, and I thought, I'm getting paranoid now. I'm going to have to stop. So I listened to some hillbilly banjo music for a couple of weeks and then got back into it again just to let my brain reset because I was getting too into it.
Yeah, mate. Look, it seems like a lot of the conspiracy theories that come into popular kind of culture seem to be driven a lot by the way that media represents information. I mean, I saw the other day there was a news story. It might have been when President Trump got in, and they used the exact same photo of him shaking someone's hand. One was like this devastated story of how President Trump is now the president of the United States. It's a big heading like, the world has ended, Trump is president or something, with this photo of him shaking someone's hand, looking like things are the end. But then they used the exact same photo in a different paper, saying how excited and everything was going great, that Trump was now the president. But the exact same photo, and just the caption itself changed the way that the photo seemed to present the information. Is that one of the main driving factors in conspiracy theories? Just the way that media presents images?
It's. I mean, with Trump, I think he's just a human headline, isn't he? I think anybody. I don't think you need much. I don't think you need much reason to look for headlines or conspiracies behind him. But saying that, I'm sure there will be things that come out saying why Trump is the president. There will be conspiracy theories. Certainly, there are about Obama at the moment. Look, media manipulation I think it's just a tool of the media, and it certainly is. If you look into the Illuminati, which is the ultra overarching rulers of our society that we don't know about, allegedly, who are responsible for how the presidents are elected and certainly how governments work. You can look into all the whole New World Order thing, which is another thing that Alex Jones was very big on back in the early 2000s, the new ruling class and how those sorts of things went. Yeah. And certainly throughout history, the media has been used as a tool of propaganda. I mean, you can go to World War II, which is probably where we get our most common examples of how propaganda was used. And in World War II, you know that if you can only look at the signs of, we need you and loose lips sink ships and all those sorts of things, particularly in Australia with the Japanese. We had to be careful. You couldn't trust any of them, and the yellow peril and all these sorts of things. Yeah. So the media is just another target of or another agent of propaganda, I think. So I don't know that they're particularly involved with conspiracy theories, but you will seem to notice. And saying that, I actually found a thing on Activist Post, activistpost.com, if you're looking, and they talk about the 11 signs of a false flag. And one of those signs of a false flag event is the use of the media only driving one particular aspect of the high-profile event, that their stories will change. So changing stories. So you will hear, particularly there's a lot of false flag information around a lot of the school shootings, the Boston bombing, James Holmes that was that shot up the cinema in the Batman movie. Oh, yeah. He's another one that they think was just a patsy. He was brainwashed. He has no recollection of what's going on. So it talks. Yeah, wow. But it started off with suddenly there were 5 shooters, then there was 3, and now it's down to the one lone gunman who was just this brilliant shot. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories around there, and certainly the media drive that because there is that need to be the first and to get the news out there first and foremost. So whether or not they're an active part of this conspiracy theory, I haven't heard, but they certainly are a tool that's used to get that information out there.
That's a good point. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Sean. And being that you are the resident expert in all things conspiracy, I would love to just get more. Give us another theory. Like I want to. I want to be able to go away from this conversation being an expert in one particular conspiracy that I can then talk to my friends about. So I'd love it if you could just, feel free to go for as long and include as much detail as you like. Tell us about something you've been thinking about.
Well, let me say that if you have one theory that you want to talk to your friends about, you won't have friends for very much longer unless they're very...
That's okay. Paul doesn't have that many to start with, so...
True.
Look, yet again, like I said, the contemporary ones are the false flag ones, but there's so many different things out there, from cryptozoology. So it's the conspiracy theories of alternate animals. So things like werewolves, the Yeti, Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, all those sorts of things. There's wild conspiracy theories about there. There's the aliens, the alien overlords that, along with the lizard people, rule the earth. There is Nibiru, which is the black planet, which is on the other side of the sun, which is going to bring about the destruction. But probably the most common one at the moment, which seems to really be gathering strength, is the flat Earth believers. I don't know if you've heard about this.
I have a mate who we actually had on the podcast last episode. Who's it wasn't a conspiracy theory episode, but I did broach the subject because it's kind of a funny thing to bring up with him. He's kind of in your sort of boat where he's done a lot of reading and kind of just shy of, he doesn't want to. He doesn't really believe anything, but he just finds it so fascinating. And apparently he was a flat earther and then kind of backed off a little bit. And it
just seems so far-fetched to me, though. Like the concept that there could be a flat earth, that seems big.
They challenge like mathematics and science, saying like gravity and the formulas we use are wrong. Like that's how far they have to go.
And let's not forget, 400 or 500 years ago, if you thought that the earth was round, then you were held in the same vein. And, it was always assumed that the earth was flat and everything went around it. But I can't get behind it. As you say, the science and the mathematics just add too much too much strength to the argument of how you could think that in the modern age. But there's the belief that the earth is flat, which is, and people take photos from the top of Everest saying, where's the curve of the earth? That the moon is just an illumination on a flat disk, that it's sent up by lasers and the moon's not actually there.
Wow.
That's big.
And the sun is like 1,000 times smaller and it's only like 4,000 miles away. That's what Andre was saying.
Except in Queensland, where I think it's only about 2,000 miles.
Yeah, that's right.
But, it's just that sort of. I mean, we call it ignorance, but these people really believe it, and to the point that it's almost cult-like. And I was listening to your episode on starting your own cult.
Yes.
Yes, I quite enjoyed that one as well. But these people that get together absolutely believe it and ignore everything else that's against them. And this is the conspiracy again. And to be perfectly honest, I haven't paid too much attention to the flat Earth. But every time you turn around in conspiracy circles, flat Earth is coming up.
Yeah.
More people are starting to buy into it, and I don't understand why. But, there's also the classics of flu injections. Flu injections are a form of government control that are dumbing us down, making us more conformists.
Have to battle that every day.
Yeah, look.
Michael's an intern at LGH.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. How are you going with that?
It's great. It's great fun. But yes, the flu shot is a daily, not at the hospital. The hospital's fine. It's the people who come up to me who know I'm a doctor and they want to pick my brain on how accurate flu vaccinations are.
Do you ever struggle with being complicit in the government's program to dumb us down and make us all simpletons?
Yeah, how do you sleep at night?
Well, look, here's the... I'm not supposed to talk about this, but I'll tell you... Here's the truth behind the flu vaccination, all right? Every year they release a new one because of the small...